Hi kids and winkles, kiddie winkles. Anyone know what winkle pickers are? Just off topic for 2 seconds. Try and Google what a winkle picker is. It's nothing to do with this lesson, but oh well, why not? So the thing what we're going to do today, if you look at the timetable, today's English lesson is sort of split into two halves. So the first half we're going to be sort of writing our sort of, I suppose, final draft, if you want to think of it like that. Our final draft of our diary, our primary source, historical primary source. Just a quick pause there. What's the difference between primary and secondary sources in history? Okay, so hopefully you've paused and you've spoken and you've shouted and you've cried and you've laughed and the emotion became too much to handle, so you spewed out the answer. That primary resource, member, is when I don't mean primary resource, do I? I mean primary source. Primary source is when you have accounted the historical moment firsthand, and then secondary is when you're writing it. You didn't necessarily experience it firsthand, but you're writing it from different sources. You're gathering your information from different sources. Look back at Monday's lesson to go look at that in bigger detail, more detail. Anyway, so we're going to be doing that by creating an accurate account of what had happened in history. So 2020 being the year that COVID-19 happened, the pandemic happened. This is probably going to be a year that they'll talk about forever. I think people will go, what year did the COVID-19 happen, the pandemic, the lockdown, the world came to a stop, and that will be 2020. So keep that year in your head all the time. How are we going to be doing that? By using our plans and timelines from Monday and Tuesday. So to start off with then, who wrote these diaries? I'm going to just quickly rewind. Some of you at school would have done this, and if you looked at the Tuesday lesson, you should have already done this slide already, but it is just a quick pause, a reminder on who wrote those two diaries. Off you go. And play. So this diary should have it now in your head is Anne Frank. I was startled to hear that some people hadn't heard of Anne Frank before, especially when we did World War II. Last year we touched on World War II and World War One last year, so Anne Frank definitely came up in conversation. She was the girl who locked herself and her family away from the Nazis in World War II in the attic, and stayed there for 2 or 3 years, I think it was now. She kept a diary for all that time. And then this one here is Samuel Pepys' diary, and he's the guy who kept a diary for a whole decade, wrote in it every day for a decade, and he actually wrote an account about the Fire of London, and that's where they got quite a lot of their information from now, actually, his diary. So they're two very famous diaries, and you are creating your own diary, which could become very famous and in a museum as well. Before we move on, another rewind, another pause, just before we do our writing. What is the difference? Now, we did this Wednesday, sorry. Oh, I'm filming this yesterday, that's why I said that. We did this on Wednesday and even on Tuesday, and it's definitely about your Kahoot as well. You've done this. What is the difference between a simple sentence, compound sentence, and a complex sentence? Pause that videos. Okay, so hopefully you have got this perfectly right. So a simple sentence is just that subject and the predicate, the namey bit and the doey bit. So Mr. Barker ate a sandwich there. That is our main clause. That's the simple sentence. The compound then is the main clause and another main clause together. Put together with that those fanboys, those coordinating conjunctions. And then finally a complex sentence then is using a subordinate clause, the clause that we can take away. And it will still make sense, okay? So that's the difference between a simple compound and a complex sentence. Compound, I always remember that, I always relate that back to maths, which you'll be doing not next week, but the week after. You'll be doing about shapes and geometry again. Compound meaning two things put together, or look, two sentences that have been put together. Okay, right, so today then you will be given something that looks something like this. This is going to be sort of the page to your diary. So those of you in school who have already had this printed off back to back, you should have a couple of 3 sheets each. Those of you who are not at school, you can either print it out yourself, or it's not really that hard just to do inside a notebook. All I've done is put a couple of squares in there, which we'll use to do our drawing on after the writing, which is that sort of the second half of this of this lesson. Or, you know, print it off or do it inside your notebook. It's totally up for you. I've just put a line there for the date, whichever day we're sort of writing on, and then I will then start writing, not on the top line, but on the second line down here, and I'll start writing my diary that way. So if we quickly nip back to here, this was sort of my first draft I did on Tuesday. So I used my timeline. I'll quickly try and find that actually. I used my timeline that we did on Monday to then sort of populate. So this was what the timeline looked like. Trying to zoom out enough. So remember, we did it by months, and we put in the day, the week, this week, and then when lockdown happened, sort of thing there. And then we sort of pulled out these ideas and gave ourselves ideas. Then we wrote our second, not dollar sign. Then we wrote our second. On Tuesday we brought that out and wrote our first draft. Then today what you're going to be doing is writing this onto this piece of paper here. So here I've tried to map it out here. So here's my two pictures that I've got, and I've started mapping it out. Now this was my first draft. I've not finished it. I will go back and I will reread and ensure that it still makes sense. Those of you who watched the Tuesday's lesson, I got stuck trying to word something round here. Because I wanted to try and make it into a complex sentence, and I didn't necessarily know how to do it, which is exactly why we do a second draft. So now I'm rereading this, and I want to change some of the things in there or add something else in. Now you can do that one of two ways. You can do that by just adding to your first draft that you did on Tuesday, that piece of paper that you did on Tuesday, or you can do it as you go along on here if you've got an idea about what you want to do. Personally, I would do it on my first draft and sort of edit over it on my first draft. So then I'm writing a beautiful day on here. And then I've just got my two pictures. Now, those of you in school, you'll draw your pictures here. You'll do that after you've done your writing. So if you get your writing done first on all 3 days, because hopefully you've done 3 days worth of planning, on all 3 days, then you can get your pictures done in here as well. Draw them in pencil, don't draw in pen. It's horrible drawing in pen, and then you can obviously colour it in pencil, crayon, felt tips, whatever you've got at home. If you are at home, you've got a choice. You can either draw your pictures, or you can obviously print off some pictures and stick them on, ready to go. Or some of you might want to do this on, what did we use before? Google Documents. So you can either go onto Google Documents, then upload them onto the Google Classroom as well. And then obviously you can just snip the pictures and copy and paste them in like we did before. There is the lesson on that on our playlist if you're unsure of how to do that again, but it's quite straightforward. Just Google Documents and press start again. So that's about it for your first section of this lesson. You're going to write up in neat your 3 days that you picked to do on Tuesday when you came to your planning. Your next half is then your pictures and your front cover. So wait there a second. So this is my attempt at a front cover. It's nothing special yet, but I've just quickly knocked it up for you. So what I did there with a ruler and a pencil, I created my guidelines here. So if I show you on the back, what I did was put my ruler down. I left a bit of a gap from the top because it's quite nice to have a bit of a border, and very lightly I just drew the top and the bottom of the ruler, and that gave me guidelines. So the sort of series that we're doing is the My Story series, isn't it? And then we're calling it the Lockdown Kid. You don't have to do it in bubble writing, you can do it exactly however you want. I did it with my story at the top and the title here. You might want to do it where you've got my story at the top, and then if I can pick up a ruler, you might want to do the Lockdown Kid here at the bottom. So what I was going to do again is leave a little bit from the top, from the bottom there, draw my line, draw my top line, and then move my ruler up, and maybe the Lockdown Kid goes on at the bottom, and then that leaves this section here for me to either write my name. I might want to write my name here. I could write my name by whoever there, and then draw a picture here of the diary. You don't necessarily have to do a picture. You could do some sort of like family crest of something on top of the diary. You could draw a sort of pattern, because if you look at the front of Anne Frank's diary, she's got a tartan pattern on her diary as well. So you can go with whatever you want. It's your diary. Once you have done your front cover, obviously you've got your piece of paper that you've written on now. You then need to bind them together. Now, a really easy way of binding it together, if you've got a hole punch, obviously put your hole punch either side. Oh wait, I haven't got a hole punch here. So just a piece of blue tack or piece of plasticine or anything you got at home, just stick it underneath a piece of paper, and then just with a pen or a sharp pencil, make a hole, bang, there we go. So I've now got a hole, and do a second one. I want to try and make it in line. Let's keep it nice and neat. There we go. And then I can either, if you've got split pins at home, you can do that, or a piece of string, you can tie them together. It's totally up to you how you want to bind it together. If you want to do it sort of the easy way, you can staple it together. But I remember when I was at primary school, I used to think that was a really good idea, stapling something together. But then when you opened it, because I'd stapled it too far into the piece of paper, I couldn't actually open my book wide enough to actually see what I've written. So just be careful when it comes to stapling if you do choose to staple it as well. Then once I've done that, because I've done these in pencil, I've done them nice and lightly, I will then rub that out with a rubber so I don't see these guidelines on my front cover, and voila, you have now got your primary source, your historical primary source. And I know Miss Harries will be very happy that we're talking about sources again. Right, post your work onto Google Classroom or onto ClassDojo. Show me all that hard work that you've been doing. If you have done it like this and you want to show us the front cover, take another picture of what it's like inside and another picture as well so I can read it as well. If you've done it on Google Slides, or sorry, Google Documents, remember to save it as your name and then upload it as well onto Google Classroom or the other one, ClassDojo, and then I can see whose it is straight away. Okay, good luck with everything, Year Sixers. See you later.